What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, it looks like Nintendo has moved to crush and absolutely wipe out the other popular Switch emulator, and it appears they're going with a strategy that they've been laying the groundwork for quite some time to deal with all of this. We're going to go over that, though, here today. Also, we are going to be talking about new games going into Game Pass and all these different tiers that Microsoft has shuffled it around and reintroduced, and I want to see how people think about, or what they think about, the presentation now for this announcement. And we also have Tango Gameworks, which you know has now been acquired by Krafton. Well, they gave us some insight as to what they were working on ahead of that acquisition, and well, I might as well just apologize now to Evil Within fans. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members for the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're going to start today with Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, which is a game that every time they've shown it looks better and better and better. And I'm excited to get my hands on this game. At some point, we kind of thought we may see a release date for it during Tokyo Game Show, but that didn't happen. However, we can see this posted up. This is by Genki, saying that the Metal Gear Solid producer apologizes that they still do not have a release date for Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater. Says they don't want to make promises to fans that they can't keep. They said they are working hard on the game and to please wait a little longer. So it's pretty obvious now, if you haven't figured it out, that it's not coming out in 2024. The reason we were thinking it was 2024 is because Sony sort of did this thing with a bit of a marketing blitz over on PlayStation Blog in a video that included Delta in like a sizzle reel of 2024 games. So that kind of strange. But I think at this point, yeah, 2025, and I'm hoping it's first half of 2025, but they do seem a little unsure right now if they're not ready to even put out a release date for it, or even, we'll just say, release year, or some sort of window, even like spring 2025. I do wonder how close we are to this thing coming out. Here's hoping, though, first half of 2025. It would be kind of a shame if we're still like a year out from a game like this, because again, so far, it looks really good. Also, there were a lot of questions coming out of TGS, specifically with Microsoft, and where Final Fantasy 16 was, because there were a lot of rumors that the Xbox was going to get a port for this game. Well, it looks like Naoki Yoshida was just asked about that. This was over on SI once again, where they just say, do you have any news on the Final Fantasy 16 Xbox port? It says, of course, we did announce the PC version of the game, so looking towards the Xbox version, we do want to release it on Xbox, but when it comes to the specifics, such as when the game would be available and such, we're not in a position to be able to share anything, but of course, I want to say that it's not as if there's zero hope, and we very much do want to achieve that, so players should not give up in terms of their hopes. It's maybe a little dramatic for that, but either way, I'm not really sure if this comes down to Sony's terms when it comes to the timed exclusivity, or them just still working to get the port to the shape that they're comfortable releasing it in. It's hard to say one way or the other, but yeah, I do believe Final Fantasy 16 is coming to the Xbox at some point. If I had to guess, it's next year at this time. I mean, if they could have, and it would have come out this holiday, they would have made that happen, but obviously it's not in the cards. So yeah, apparently, yeah, don't give up hope. It'll show up on the Xbox at some point. I mean, here they are just openly talking about it. So once again, here's hoping it's sooner rather than later going into next year. Oh, and we got a bit more information around that listing that appeared in the ratings board for Siren, because, I mean, that got people talking about the potential for a brand new game, them rebooting the franchise. What do we have with Fire Sprite? Are they working on a Siren game? Or is it a PlayStation Classic situation and it's just going to appear in that premium tier for PSN? Well, it looks like it's actually just that. In fact, it was spotted, we can see. This is over on the PS Deals, as there was an update to the PlayStation database for Siren, and it does mention the PlayStation 2 Classic with enhanced with up rendering, rewind, quick save, and custom video filters. All of these things, of course, playing into what we see with just the PS2 games now on Classics with a very similar passage. So, yeah, it looks like the Siren game, the Classic from the PlayStation 2 era, will at some point find its way into PlayStation Plus Premium, and I think that's about right. I mean, sure, it would have been interesting to see what a new Siren game would be able to do with the newer technology with something like the PlayStation 5, but this is kind of what I was expecting. Something from that classics, the PlayStation Classics section going into premium. Maybe this is something being lined up for next month. We'll keep an eye on it. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo taking down another emulator. This one being the other popular Switch emulator. Basically, when Yuzu got taken down by Nintendo, I mean, they really took that down quick. As soon as the lawsuit was filed and stuff, it seemed like they had a pretty good case, because it was like, what, a day or two later, it was gone. That was it. Well, it looks like Ryujinx is going through something similar, but not to that extent. It didn't get that serious anyway, because when Yuzu went away, it was like, well, we still have Ryujinx, and seems like it's fine, because obviously Nintendo would have gone after that one if it wasn't. Well, if we take a look over on Ryujinx's website, it does have a very important distinction here. It says Ryujinx is an open source Nintendo Switch emulator created by GDK Chan and written in C#. The big thing here, though, it being open source, of course, means you can just check it out as much as you want. You look through the code, everything. I mean, this was really a community collaboration overall for this program. This emulator aims at providing excellent accuracy and performance, a user-friendly interface, and consistent builds. I mean, they did put out a lot for Ryujinx, so much so that Nintendo clearly took notice. As we can see, Oatmeal Dome posted this up over on their account, saying Ryujinx, Nintendo Switch emulator, has ceased development. The lead developer was pressured by Nintendo of America into shutting down the project. All downloads and the GitHub repositories have been removed. Now, this appears to have been posted up, I guess, over on their Discord. This is from Rippin' Perry Perry, who says, yesterday GDK Chan was contacted by Nintendo and offered an agreement to stop working on the project, remove the organization, and all related assets he's in control of. While awaiting confirmation on whether he would take this agreement, the organization has been removed. So I think it's safe to say what the outcome is. Now, some were trying to figure out what exactly that agreement meant. I think it's pretty straightforward. Nintendo said, hey, we're basically going to proceed with maybe like a court filing or something there to get a bit more serious. We're just letting you know that's the case. Basically a cease and desist, right? Hey, we're coming after you if this doesn't get removed or just come down completely. And look, if you're doing this project as pretty much like a hobbyist kind of thing, because, well, they had a Patreon, I believe, at one point in time, or they may have still had then. It wasn't the size of Yuzu or what we saw with like Dolphin or Simu or nothing like that. It was a bit smaller, and I feel like it wasn't necessarily current when something like this was going on. So either way, they weren't pulling in a ton of money or anything. Didn't feel like it was set up as a business venture for them. Just like, hey, we're making this emulator. It's open source. We're collaborating with a big community. And the results were pretty good. Like, if you look at it now, people were streaming emulation builds of the emulation build, running all kinds of commercial games that weren't even out at times. And that's the thing that I think Nintendo has realized a path they can go here is, look, if your emulator's set up to play our games before they're even on the market, you've pirated the game in some way, and that's something we're going to use against you. And in fact, Ryujinx has been out there doing that with, I think, even Echoes of Wisdom was one very recently that had screenshots and video posted up of it running in the Ryujinx emulator. But above all else, Nintendo pretty much can just lean on anyone if they want them to go away with something like an emulator, or if they want people to stop featuring their characters in emulation videos, as we talked about with Retro Gamecore. Who really wants to go to court with Nintendo over something like this when it's a business for them and it's a hobby for the other person, in this case with Ryujinx? And the easiest path forward is, okay, I'll just pull this stuff down and move on. I mean, look, if you want Ryujinx, it's out there. You can get it. It just doesn't seem like development will continue along for this specific version of it. And I say version because we know how this works with emulators. One goes down, a bunch of other ones pop up through different forks or just new emulators that are inspired by this one going down. So I think at this time, Nintendo, because people are wondering why now with something like Ryujinx, they went this whole generation and all of a sudden they go after Yuzu. They knocked that out completely. Go after Ryujinx. That's gone now. Well, I mean, these emulators became very, very advanced, and it takes a while for Nintendo to build these cases, especially with Yuzu, where it was found they were in the Discord for them collecting information in the background. But we're going to the next generation with Nintendo. At any point now, they're going to announce a thing, and then we're going to head into that way in 2025. It's very clear, I think, at this point, they're going to have backwards compatibility. Like, most of us assume that. So they're still going to sell these Switch games. And if you're Nintendo, you want to start putting people off of attempting to emulate your next system. So when you have these kind of legal threats out there just around the current Switch landscape for emulation, why would you go out there and say, I'm going to emulate Nintendo's next system because it's obviously going to work out for me? No, you're going to say, I'm not going to waste years of my life potentially on this only for them to come knocking me, shut it down completely. So they're looking at that as, let's get this sorted now, by just threatening cease and desist and lawsuits all over the place until people don't want to do it anymore. And so far, it seems to be working for them, whether it's videos that have their characters in emulation scenarios or just those emulators in general for their current devices. But let me know what you thought about this when Ryujinx just randomly was like, yeah, guys, we're calling it a day because Nintendo came knocking. Next up, let's talk about new Game Pass games going into the service for October. This is pretty much for like the first half of the month, I guess, wave 1, coming off the heels of Tokyo Game Show when we saw some shadow drops directly into the service. And I noticed something with this press release and the news section on their Xbox website. They're now starting to talk about those different tiers that they've introduced, and it is looking, I don't want to say complicated, but definitely a bit more cumbersome than what they had previously. So we can see this posted up over on news.xbox.com. They have the card at the top to showcase all the titles, and we'll go through them, of course. Starting with MLB The Show 24, that's on console, October 2nd. That's Game Pass Standard. Remember, they have Ultimate tier, they have Standard tier, they have PC, and then they have Core. Standard is the tier that doesn't get the day one games. They'll slowly have them cycled in from Ultimate. And then also on October 2nd, we have Open Roads. That's Game Pass Standard. And then we have Sifu. That is on Game Pass Ultimate, PC Game Pass, and Game Pass Standard. So there you go, Sifu going in. Awesome game. I recommend checking it out. It was a lot of fun. I played it when it came out back on the PlayStation. It should still be good now. Again, it was a lot of fun. Very different kind of game too. But you kind of see what I mean. You have, okay, so you have a Game Pass Ultimate, you have Standard, you have PC Game Pass. They're basically throwing all these underneath of each game. And then even below that, you have to count for, is it console, is it PC, is it cloud? It's just, there's a lot happening here for their different subscription services, and it's becoming a bit tedious, I'd say. But they also have Mad Streets, that's Game Pass Ultimate, PC Game Pass Standard on October 7th. And then Inscription, another good game. That's October 10th, Game Pass Ultimate, PC Game Pass Standard on cloud, console, and PC. And then just a quick reminder here for the games coming out of Tokyo Game Show. All you need is help. Legend of Mana, Trials of Mana, and We Love Katamari Reroll, plus Royal Reverie. So again, it does look a little strange the way that they're presenting these with these slides and all the basically fine print with the different tiers. But hey, if you're on Game Pass Ultimate, I guess it really doesn't matter anyway. You just get everything. It's just, I am curious, anyone out there who's watching, did you end up on Game Pass Standard? And let me know why that is and what you think so far about the rollout for that with things like MLB The Show 24 now going into that service. Next up, let's talk about Tango Gameworks. As we know, Krafton has acquired the Tango Gameworks from Microsoft, and apparently they're still in the acquisition phase. I'm sure all the paperwork and everything has to be transferred and cross T's, dot I's for Hi-Fi Rush, which was the one intellectual property they seemed very interested in taking with Tango Gameworks. Well, there was an interview that happened with gamesindustry.biz, and we can see some of it here with one question in particular that stood out to everyone because it sort of talks about what Tango was working on ahead of that acquisition. Now, that's according to Krafton head of corporate development, Maria Park, who when asked about Tango's other projects, they say, we primarily focused on Hi-Fi Rush. It was more of a strategic decision. It would have been great to get all the IPs, but the team was working on Hi-Fi Rush 2, and the others were working on anniversary content for The Evil Within, knowing Microsoft's direction with the IP sale. We didn't want to push too far with this acquisition, so we primarily had Hi-Fi Rush under discussion because it would complicate the process and elongate the entire negotiation process. As in, do we want to take everything with Tango, like with The Evil Within? And it is a shame because they were, okay, so they're doing the anniversary content for Evil Within. I guess Microsoft could still put that content out at some point, but I saw Evil Within mentioned, and people have been asking for an Evil Within 3. You feel like if you're making anniversary content, you're also thinking about what would be next for that series. And I do think that if in a perfect world, a perfect universe there, where they stayed with Microsoft, they got the green light to not only work on Hi-Fi Rush 2, because the first Hi-Fi Rush was a critical success in terms of reception with the reviews and stuff, that they would also maybe work on the next Evil Within game. But here, with them going over to Krafton, it kind of feels like that's it for the Evil Within. I don't know who else would work on it within Microsoft. This was kind of like Tango's thing. So that kind of a shame there for Evil Within fans. That said, Krafton seems very, very interested in Hi-Fi Rush, and it seems like they're not interested in rushing Hi-Fi Rush 2 to market. This is something they want to take their time with, along with Tango Gameworks, and make sure it's done to the best of their ability. Make sure there's not any quality issues when it comes out, and it has enough resources to reach the certain level of scope. I'm sure that they're planning out here to be a much bigger game than the first Hi-Fi Rush. So that is something fun to keep an eye on here, but it also sounds like it's going to be quite a while before we see Hi-Fi Rush 2, although they did mention they at least were building out Hi-Fi Rush 2 already in order to pitch and present it, I guess, to Microsoft. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about Halo Infinite and that Tatanka game type or game, some kind of spin-off that was attached to Halo Infinite, and this was said to be a Battle Royale-like mode. Unfortunately, it appears that it has been canceled, and 343 has now moved on to work on focus on completely the next Halo game, which I do think is very important for them to get moving on, but we got some additional details for it. We can see this posted up. This is by Rebs Gaming, who has had good reports in the past on different things from Halo and 343, and this is all about seemingly that Tatanka game. Now, they just say it's tied into Joseph Staten's campaign narrative. 343 held internal playtests for Tatanka on a weekly basis. Players started in a loading bay and they dropped into the map in ODST drop pods, which you have to drop in somehow. Kind of reminds me now, looking at it, as Helldivers 2, where you sort of just drop in through these pods to the ground, and then when you hit the ground, you just pop out of them and start firing all over the place. So I can kind of picture what exactly that would have looked like, but the map took place on fragments of the Zeta Halo ring. Each fragment had different biomes with man cannons and launch players to other fragments, so I guess you would have certain areas that might be like winter, like so there's snow, and then others might be more tropical. Maybe there's some that have like lava. There's a lot of potential for just the environment that you would basically be battling it out in something like this Royale mode. There are also many objectives that rewarded players with power items, equipment, partial shields. You have Pelicans dropping off vehicles. That's kind of cool. So in the middle of a battle royale, they could drop a Warthog to you, and you and a couple of friends could hop in and just start cruising around with that. But at this time, it appears it had been canceled sometime in 2023. So of course, 343 could focus on the next Halo game. And Halo Infinite, it's unfortunate because, one, it didn't come out to the standards they wanted it to, and it really hurt the Halo franchise. I feel like it's just, no one talks about Halo anymore. Back in the day, Halo was like one of the big video game franchises out there. I mean, it held up Microsoft completely during that original Xbox when it first came to market. Master Chief was like their mascot. That was it. The Xbox 360, when Halo 3 came out, that was an event, and I really cannot stress enough how big of a deal that was when you saw the commercial, whether it was like during the Super Bowl, and they had some awesome stuff going on then, and it got people really, really hyped, even in the mainstream. Now it just feels like so much of an afterthought for most gamers. So I would like them to get this all figured out, leave Halo Infinite behind, and try to work through what the next Halo game should be. Even if, it sounds crazy, even if you rebooted it, I wouldn't mind if you had a clear vision as to what you wanted out of it. It felt like Halo Infinite was all over the place, felt like they stapled two games together to get it out the door, and it just felt so disjointed the entire way, to the point where when they first showed it, they had to delay it further, and it missed the Xbox Series launch. So here's hoping when Halo is ready to return, because I do think we're going to get another one of these. Shocker, right? Microsoft isn't going to just bury Halo and retire it. I'm hoping when it does come back, they're actually ready to bring it back, and it's not one of those half in, half out scenarios, and it ends up being another disaster. So here's hoping 343 can get things figured out, back on track, and I assume set up for Microsoft's next generation system that is still rumored to be launching late 2026 into 2027. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, are you buying Super Mario Party Jamboree? 50% are just not interested. 33% say maybe later if there's a sale. Some were saying, oh, there's not gonna be a sale. I've seen Super Mario Party go on sale. I've seen Mario Party Superstars go on sale, whether it's on Amazon, retailers, sometimes Nintendo digitally. 17% say yes, I'm just getting it ASAP. I will say obviously Mario Party games come out pretty consistently, but they are getting to a position where they're kind of blurring together for me now. This one though, with the online play of like 20 people, does stick out somewhat. So I'm going to keep an eye on it to see how the multiplayer aspect holds up with that online play, and if it's good, I might pick it up. Could be maybe a fun time to have with some of the members of the Spawncast at some point in the video. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day as you're seeing here. This is from Zane, who says, yes, Nintendo GameCube Mini. Shut up, it's clearly a GameCube Mini. You know what, if Nintendo made it, I would definitely buy it. Even if, look, if it's the GameCube Mini, the hardware has to at least be somewhat decent to play it well. It wouldn't be a cheap thing. It would probably be like 150 to $200. I would pick that up right away. That'd be so cool to see a little cube you can buy from Nintendo that plays GameCube games. Sure have the plugs on the front for the GameCube controllers that they still produce, by the way. But I think now that we have Nintendo rolling along with NSO with their library of digital titles from like their retro selection of games, it's really unnecessary now. And their next system will, I think, be more than enough to emulate GameCube games well. So they'd rather just distribute it that way, up the subscription service price and roll along, rather than deal with manufacturing and cost to R&D. It's just, there's a lot involved there, and I think they had their fill of that with the NES Classic and the Super Nintendo Classic. They got out right before things got interesting, potentially, with a Nintendo 64 Classic to see how they would handle some of that emulation and what hardware they would tap for it. But yeah, I think that's the way it is now going forward with pretty much all these companies. Sony with their PlayStation Classic being the last one because they have their PlayStation Network Classic Premium selection. They're just all going software and just making you subscribe going forward. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll let it up here in a card so you can check it out. Or maybe you wanted to spend more than 3 hours with Mystic Ryan and myself as we talked about all things PlayStation in the latest Click R3 podcast. I'll leave it right below it. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.